In our previous sessions, we've already begun learning about the general concept known as the 12 Partzuphim that make up each and every world. However, till now, we've been speaking only in very general terms, as we've been illustrating how the 12 Partzuphim that make up the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of any particular world are positioned within the circular Igulim aspect of that particular world. However, from this point onwards, we'll advance onto learning some of the more detailed secrets that the Arizal revealed regarding the 12 Partzuphim. As we advance together in our upcoming discussion, we'll certainly be addressing the difference between the Partzuphim and the Sefirot. And as we'll eventually learn, the difference between these two concepts is actually very, very fine and is evident on more than one facet, what will certainly demand considerable time and effort on our behalf in order to properly clarify. Yet the very first thing that you need to know is that although the Arizal made it clear that every single Partzuf has one representation in the circular Igulim aspect of the worlds, as well as another representation in the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the worlds, nevertheless, the Zohar and the Arizal speak almost exclusively about the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the spiritual worlds and of the Partzufim and Sefirot that make up these linear worlds. Why is that? Because physical man is also built in a linear fashion, as evident from our long erect appearance, with a head on top and legs on the bottom. And because of our linear physical nature, it is therefore very difficult for us to properly relate to the circular aspect of the worlds, as we can barely even picture them in our mind, let alone appreciate their spiritual essence. Therefore, because man isn't naturally compatible with the circular aspect of the worlds, the Zohar and the Arizal, generally speaking, do not discuss the circular Igulim, except for some very introductory discussions, such as the ones we are currently learning. However, as we delve deeper and deeper into the teachings of the Arizal, we'll be hearing less and less about the circular Igulim and more about the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the world. However, since the Arizal begins his first discussion with the concept of the Tzimtzum, and since the Tzimtzum occurred in a circular fashion, and since the circular Igulim are designed to parallel, or at least to resemble, the shape of the circular Tzimtzum, therefore it was necessary for us to speak in depth about the Igulim at this early stage of our learning. Why am I stressing all of this to you? Because most of the concepts that we will be discussing in the near future apply primarily to the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the world. For example, we'll soon be demonstrating how the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the Partzuphim have distinctions such as up and down, or head and feet, or right and left. And although the circular Igulim aspect of the worlds also have the equivalent of all the above-mentioned distinctions, nevertheless, it is very, very hard for us to imagine, never mind to put into words, how distinctions such as up and down, or head and feet, or right and left could possibly relate to the circular aspect of the world. Inasmuch, this is why the Kabbalistic literature doesn't usually speak about the circular Igulim, except of course for these very preliminary introductory discussions. Having said that, the very first details that we'll be clarifying is the alignment of the 12 Partzuphim that make up each and every world. And although we already enumerated the names of these 12 Partzuphim, nevertheless, now we'll proceed to discuss the meaning of these names with regards to the function of each particular Partzuf, as well as with regards to the relation that each particular Partzuf has with the other Partzufim. And if you remember our previous illustrations, we intentionally illustrated the linear Ve-Yosher aspect of the Partzuphim in the shape of cylinders, where each single Partzuf is represented by one cylinder inside of another cylinder. According to that, we can see how the first Partzuf, which is called Atik Dechura, is the innermost cylinder in our picture, placed inside of the second Partzuf, which is called Nukvei de Atik. That is how we illustrated the organization of the 12 Partzufim at that earliest stage of our learning in our previous sessions. However, now we'll proceed to clarify that in fact these first two Partzufim, i.e. Atik Dechura and Nukvei de Atik, are actually two parts of the same Partzuf, which is called Atik Yomin. In Aramaic, Atik Dechura actually means the male side of Atik, and Nukvei de Atik means the female side of Atik. And although in the near future we'll certainly discuss the name and the function of the general Partzuf known as Atik Yomin, nevertheless, already from now you should take to heart that the first and the second of the 12 Partzufim in any world are actually the male and the female side of the greater Partzuf known as Atik Yomin, or Atik in short. And it is well known that the Torah often associates the right side with the measure of Chesed, i.e. with the measure of mercy, while the left side is usually associated with the measure of Gevurah and Dinim, i.e. with the measure of might and vengeance. In fact, the secret is actually alluded to in the Talmud, in Masechet Sanhedrin, where our sages teach us that Semol docha v'yamin mekarevet, i.e. the left arm pushes away, while the right arm draws closer. And this is the reason why the male side of Partzuf Atik Yomin, which is Atik Dechura, is situated on the right side, while the female side of Partzuf Atik Yomin, which is Nukvei de Atik, is situated on the left side. And the same holds for the male and the female sides of any Partzuf, as the male is always on the right side, while the female is always on the left side. Unless you wonder, why is it that the male side represents the measure of Chesed, and why is it that the female side represents the measure of Gevurah and Din? I'll explain to you that on a spiritual level, the concepts male and female actually mean giver and receiver, as the male aspect of any Partzuf is the side that endows, i.e. that gives, the spiritual bounty that his female counterpart needs. The female side, on the other hand, is designed in a way that makes her dependent upon the spiritual bounty that her male counterpart is supposed to give her. Inasmuch, I guess you can say that she is a natural taker while he is a natural giver. However, by no means are the male and the female aspects of the spiritual worlds like the males and the females that we are accustomed to seeing in our physical world. But it is well known and publicized that the Kabbalists often use parables from our physical world in order to convey deep secrets about the spiritual worlds. Therefore, here too the Kabbalists, so to speak, borrowed the concept of male and female in order to impress upon us that the spiritual worlds also contain an element that naturally gives over to its counterpart, who is his natural recipient. And it is no secret that in our physical world, more often than not, it is the male that gives to his female counterpart and not the other way around. In fact, we see this phenomenon on more than one facet. First of all, it is the husband's role to financially support his wife and not the other way around, as stipulated in the ketuvah, the marriage contract. Additionally, the husband is also required to provide his wife with most of her other needs as well, not only her various physical needs, such as a house to live in and clothes to wear, but also with her emotional and spiritual needs as well, such as giving her personal attention and an attentive ear to all her problems. But perhaps their give-take relationship is most evident in the fashion with which the husband's physical body unites with his wife's body during their marital relations. As during their union, it is as obvious as can be that the husband is the one who gives to his wife the seed of birth, and that his wife is the natural recipient of his seed. And it is no secret that even their physical body is intentionally built in a way that makes the male a natural giver of that seed, while his female counterpart is built in a way that makes her a natural recipient of her husband's seed. I think we've proven that point well enough. And as you see in the illustration before you in the color purple, the male and the female sides of Partzuf Atik Yomin collectively make up the greatest Partzuf of any world, as the height of this Partzuf begins from the uppermost point of that world and ends at the very bottom of that world. Following the male and the female sides of Atik Yomin, then come the male and the female sides of the next general Partzuf, as seen here in the color green. These are Arich Dechura on the right and Nukvei Darich on the left. And together, these two private Partzufim make up the general Partzuf known as Arich Anpin, which we'll speak about in much greater depth in the future. However, for the meantime, note how the two sides of Arich Anpin in the color green are actually slightly shorter than the two sides of Atik Yomin in the color purple. Also note how the two sides of Atik Yomin are actually positioned within the two sides of Arich Anpin. These two phenomena are in accordance with a very general rule that shapes the hierarchy of the Partzufim. Namely, that the greater Partzuf is always higher than the lesser Partzuf, as well as more internal than the lesser Partzuf. And when we analyze this particular alignment of the Partzufim, we come to understand that in this fashion, the greater Partzuf is in position to receive its light of Rachamim from a higher place in the Kav. After all, we know that the innermost cylinder within all the other linear Ve-Yosher Partzufim is the Kav, through which the light of Rachamim enters the Halal from the Ein Sof. On the other hand, the lesser Partzuf, who is also the lower Partzuf, cannot receive its own light of Rachamim from that same high place in the Kav as its predecessor, since it simply does not reach that height. Additionally, we should also take to heart that since the greater Partzuf is positioned inside the lesser Partzuf, it therefore acts as a barrier of sorts between the Kav and the lesser Partzuf, which is positioned outside of the greater Partzuf. And this is indeed another reason why the lesser Partzuf receives less light of Rachamim from the Kav, since every single barrier that stands between any Partzuf and the Kav necessarily diminishes how much light of Rachamim will eventually reach that Partzuf via the Kav through all these barriers. And in the near future, we'll see by means of a detailed three-dimensional illustration how all the Partzufim are organized in a meticulous alignment. One Partzuf within the next Partzuf, as well as one Partzuf reaching higher than the next Partzuf. Returning to our discussion, after the male and the female sides of Arich Anpin, then come along the Partzuf called Abba, as we see here in the color red, as well as the Partzuf called Ima in the color pink. And although upon first impression it may seem that Abba and Ima are individual Partzuphim in and of themselves, nevertheless we'll soon learn how even Abba and Ima are actually the male and the female sides that join together to make up another general Partzuf, the same way that Atik Yumin and Arich Anpin are also comprised of a male and a female side. But before we get into all these details, we'll first learn how after Abba and Ima come the Partzuf known as Yisrael Saba in the color blue, as well as the Partzuf known as Tevuna in the light blue color. And yes, they too combine to make up the male and the female sides of another general Partzuf, as we'll also learn in depth in the near future. And after Yisrael Saba and Tevuna, then come along the Partzuf known as Ze'er Anpin in the color orange, as well as the Partzuf known as Leah in the color yellow. And of course, they too make up the male and the female sides of another general Partzuf, which we'll learn about in the near future. And after Ze'er Anpin and Leah, then come along the Partzuf known as Yaakov, as well as the Partzuf known as Rachel, as you can see them in the very bottom of our illustration in the purple and dark purple colors. And again, it is needless to say that Yaakov and Rachel also make up the male and the female sides of a general Partzuf. And now we'll hammer in by means of an illustration the great rule that we spoke about earlier on regarding the organization of the 12 Partzufim relative to each other. And if you remember, the rule of thumb was that any greater Partzuf is always higher than the lesser Partzuf, as well as more internal than the lesser Partzuf. And in order to help us see and appreciate that rule of thumb with the eye of our mind, let us now examine the alignment of the 12 Partzufim that make up each and every world from a side view. These are the 12 Partzufim of any world. Atik, Dechura, and Nukvei de Atik, Arich, Dechura, and Nukvei de Arich, Abba and Ima, Yisrael Saba and Tevuna, Ze'er Anpin and Leah, and finally Yaakov and Rachel. And as I have already alluded to, these 12 private Partzufim are actually the 12 halves that make up the 6 general Partzufim of any world. How so? Because the 6 Partzufim on the right side of any world make up the male side of the 6 general Partzufim of that world. On the other hand, the 6 Partzufim on the left side of any world make up the female side of the 6 general Partzufim of that world.